If you've ever heard the word trauma and immediately thought, well, what happened to me wasn't trauma, or nothing that bad happened, or other people had it way worse, then this episode is for you because today I want to reframe trauma in a way that doesn't require you to compare your pain, label yourself, or justify your experience. So stick around because you'll hear why trauma isn't about the events of the past. It's about the impact those events had on you and how your mind and nervous system adapted to navigate a life based on those events. Welcome to the You're Not the Problem podcast, where the conversations help you understand your nervous system, your patterns, and the adaptations that have been running your life so you can stop turning on yourself and start standing with yourself. In this space, we tell the truth about unwanted behaviors like emotional eating, overworking, people-pleasing, procrastination, and self-sabotage. We talk about what it's like to live with ongoing stress and overwhelm, how that state shapes your choices, your relationships, and your health, and how to step into a lighter, more grounded, deeply authentic way of living. My hope is that every time you listen, you feel less alone, more compassionate towards your patterns, and more rooted in the truth that you're not the problem, you're the possibility. So let's talk about trauma. The best definition of trauma is really any experience that overwhelms the nervous system of the individual at the time the event happened, right? There's no imaginary definition of what an experience must be to qualify as traumatic. What's traumatic for me may not be for you, and vice versa. Still, for many people, the word trauma feels like too much. It feels clinical, dramatic, or like something you have to earn, right? Your experience has to earn that label. But there's this unspoken, hierarchy of suffering where only certain experiences count and everything else is just supposed to roll off. And because of that, many people don't apply the valuable understandings and tools that trauma research has taught us. Not because it couldn't help them, but because they don't see themselves as having experienced trauma. So I'd like to change that. Now, I'm not trying to get everyone to say they've experienced trauma, but what I would like is to make trauma tools and frameworks available to more people, even those that assume that what they have experienced doesn't rise to the level of trauma. And as we start this conversation, let me say that having experienced trauma does not mean something is wrong with you. I know I thought that forever. I just wanted to pretend that I was normal, that I didn't need to deal with what had happened to me, that I wasn't damaged because of what happened to me. Also, please know that trauma is not a life sentence and it is not an identity. But here's what is true for all of us. We all have experiences. Those experiences impact us and our nervous system, and our nervous system and our thought patterns adapt in response to those experiences. There's no one for whom that isn't true. Over the last few decades, trauma research has given us incredibly useful frameworks and tools for dealing with our adapted states of thought and nervous system. We now understand how human nervous systems and minds adapt under stress, threat, loss, pressure, or unmet needs. So from my perspective, the question, do my experiences count as trauma, isn't one that we necessarily have to answer directly. Instead, it's more helpful to ask, how did my system adapt to what I lived through? And are those adaptations still serving me now? We don't need to define your experiences as trauma to be able to apply what we've learned. We can use what trauma research and therapeutic models have taught us about the nervous system to understand our patterns, regardless of whether we would ever call our experiences traumatic. Because trauma at its core is evidence of adaptation. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it needed to do with the information, the support, and safety that were or weren't available at the time. Now, one of the most important shifts that we can make is this. Trauma is not defined by the event. It's defined by the impact on your nervous system. Two people can go through the exact same experience and come out very differently. Why? Because impact depends on many things, such as how old you were, whether you had support afterwards, whether the experience was ongoing or unpredictable, whether your body felt like it could escape, protest, or express what was happening. And sometimes trauma isn't one big moment. Sometimes it's things like growing up with emotional unpredictability, being praised for being mature or low maintenance, learning early on that your needs were inconvenient, or living under constant pressure with no real pause. It doesn't have to be something explosive or headline worthy. We humans adapt to our environment, whatever that environment contained. And the key thing to understand is this: your body doesn't organize around logic, it organizes around safety. And this is where we can think of things like a spectrum, right? Instead of thinking about trauma as something you either have or don't have, it's more accurate and more useful to think in terms of nervous system regulation. So on one end of the spectrum is flexibility, safety, recovery. On the other end is chronic threat, overwhelm, or shutdown. And most people live somewhere more towards the middle. And you might notice patterns for yourself, like being constantly on high alert or braced for something to go wrong. You may have moments of feeling numb, disconnected, or checked out. You may do a lot of over-functioning, always doing, always fixing, always managing. You may notice people-pleasing as a way to feel safe in your relationships. You may rely on coping mechanisms to navigate difficult emotions or experiences. You may have physical symptoms or ailments or inability to sleep. And all of these things, these are not personal flaws. They're strategies. They're signs of how your nervous system learned to reach for a sense of safety, connection, or control. These patterns formed as a result of your day-to-day experiences. Now, let me make a comment about comparison, okay? Because comparison is one of the biggest reasons why people often resist the idea that they have experienced trauma and thereby block themselves from the tools that can help them. They think things like, things weren't that bad for me. I shouldn't feel this way. Others had it so much worse. I'm lucky, so I should be fine. And I've heard a lot of these statements, even from people within my community, as I have shared the story of my early life experiences and circumstances in my book, You're Not the Problem, which is being released this spring. People are reading that and they're saying things like, oh, you have an excuse for your adaptations, but I don't. But comparison doesn't calm the nervous system, it silences it, right? Your body doesn't care about perspective. It doesn't care about gratitude lists. It doesn't check to see if your experience was bad enough. It only knows what it learned. So minimizing your experience, it doesn't make you stronger. It teaches your system that its signals aren't welcome. The aloneness that you felt when you endured tough experiences, it's only reinforced as the one person that's capable of offering you support turns away from you. That person, of course, is you. Truthfully, pain is not a competition. Healing isn't about ranking your suffering. You're allowed to take your experience seriously, even if no one else ever named it for you. This is why trauma spectrum work applies to so many areas of life, because it shows up for people in how they handle stress, how they relate in intimacy, why rest can feel so uncomfortable, why you might be pushing past your limits, why you feel stuck even though you're trying so hard to do everything right. Healing starts with noticing the adaptations your system created to navigate your world. And from there, we can start increasing your present moment capacity and helping your nervous system learn that it has more options now. By using what we've learned about how trauma impacts the nervous system and thought patterns, you can learn to adapt again, this time towards more safety, resilience, and agency. And when I say we don't have to center on the definition of trauma here, I just want to be clear that I'm talking about from a personal understanding. Trauma frameworks give us powerful tools for working with the nervous system patterns, and those tools are useful whether your experiences meet a formal definition or not. The goal isn't to decide what to call your past, it's to understand what your nervous system did and whether those patterns are still serving you. By erasing the need to qualify for the type of trauma-informed compassionate care that can make a significant difference, you can learn how to change patterns that are no longer serving you. You don't need to fix yourself, you just need to understand yourself. And the first step you can take is the Nervous System Signature Quiz. This quiz is not a diagnosis, It's a snapshot of your nervous system, and it helps you determine what your default state is. So if you're curious, start there. Take the quiz, see where your system is operating right now. And with this awareness, you can start taking the first step towards breaking old patterns that are no longer helpful or needed. Now, if you found something in this episode helpful, or if it made you curious, like the video, subscribe to the channel. This will make it easier for you to find useful content. It will help me reach more people who need to hear they're not the problem, they are the possibility.